All right, let me get you up to speed on everything that happened in Avatar: The Last Airbender, Episode 4, Into the Dark. Okay, so this episode starts off with Aang and General Iroh being locked up. They just got captured by the Earth Nation soldiers after the little skedaddle, the little attack, the little kerfuffle, if you will, that happened in the city of Omashu. And obviously Prince Zuko was throwing some little fireballs around, and Aang was putting out the fireballs with his little airbending little... But of course, he was one of the first people that got, picked up by the Earthbenders, and they were like, not in our city. And of course, like I mentioned in my last recap, I was like, imagine the audacity. Then quickly we jump scenes over to Sokka confronting Sai, the mechanic guy, the machinist, whatever they call him, who was creating those weapons for the Fire Nation. Now, don't get me wrong, do I think he's actually a bad guy? Not really. He was basically creating these weapons for the Fire Nation to essentially protect himself and his family, and it was a way to try, in his mind, keep peace. But like Sokka was saying, I would never put these weapons in the hands of the bad guys to save myself or my family or the people surrounding me immediately. And Sai was just basically, bro, I don't agree with you. And Sokka's like, bro, I don't agree with you. You know what I mean? So it's he's not really a bad guy. He had good intentions. He just didn't go about it the right way. Then Aang gets requested to have a little sit down, a little chit chat with the king of Omashu, which is actually Bumi. And if you know who Bumi is from watching the TV show, the animated version, Bumi is actually one of his childhood friends. Spoiler alert if you've never seen the show. So in this live action version, King Bumi is giving me gold member vibes from Austin Powers. Whereas in the animated version, he's very kooky. He's very decrepit looking, but he is actually super muscular and he's a baddie martial artist kind of guy. But in this version, he's very Austin Powers gold member, and I'm not digging it. And actually, one of my favorite scenes from the animated version is the little trial that Sokka, Katara, and Aang go through, where Sokka and Katara are actually enveloped by those crystals, the gemstones, that are actually edible crystals. It's like candy. They just don't realize it at the moment, and they're literally being encapsulated, as Aang actually has to go through this whole trial, this challenge moment process, whatever you want to call it, until he figures out who King Bumi actually is. And when he realizes through this trial that is his actual childhood friend Bumi, until he realizes that, then when he does, Katara and Sokka get to be, released. But they skip that whole thing, and it's actually a 4-second process of him meeting King Bumi and actually realizing that it's his childhood friend. So I didn't love that, and I understand that's filler, and they're cutting out a lot of filler so far out of this series, which I understand that they have to do that because these are real people, and they have to cut out a lot of filler so that we can really, accelerate the timeline to get through a lot, and that's totally fine. We don't need the filler. I get it. I think overall, with some proper character development, King Bumi can become the King Bumi that we all know and love from the animated version, but as of right now, he's not giving me the right vibes. And as I mentioned before, the show's all about the right vibes. These characters need to have the right vibes. Then we switch up the scenes a little bit, and Katara and Sokka are underground. They're in a cave, guided by these illuminating crystals. They're trying to find Aang, and they're fighting as siblings do, of course, and they're just having a moment. They get through the fighting, they have a bonding moment, all the fun stuff, and it's kind of an extended scene. It's prolonged. I'm okay, let's go, let's go, let's go. Then there's a whole flashback moment to where Iroh and Zuko are having a nice little family moment, and it shows, Prince Zuko being super nice, and I love that for him because, it shows Zuko in a light where, he's not always, a douchebag, he was super nice and blah, 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 and, that's nice and everything, but also I feel it would have been more impactful if in the now, in present time, he was, really spicy and really mean and really blah, he's actually supposed to be, because it would be more contrasting, because, right now, he's actually not really mean, and then they're showing him also not mean, so I'm it's not as opposite as it's supposed to be, you know what I mean? His personalities are supposed to be super opposite in that moment, whereas right now they're not super polar opposite, and I'm it's not as effective. Then we flash back again to this little kerfuffle with Aang and King Bumi. And King Bumi's you know what, Aang, I'm gonna teach you a lesson because you're just not getting it right now. You're just not getting the gravity of the situation. You've been in an iceberg for 100 years. You don't know the struggle that everyone's gone through. He's I've lived 100 years at this point. I've had to see the world crumble. I've had to deal with all this loss, destruction, chaos, and madness, all the things, and you haven't. You've literally just been peace out, bye, you know what I mean? So he's like, I'm gonna teach you a lesson. He throws off his robe and he's like, ripped, and I'm like, well, bro, settle down. Like, so they have this little fight scene, and then of course, Katara and Sokka come in to try and save the day, and like the whole time Bumi is trying to teach Aang a lesson, and Sokka and Katara ruin the lesson, and basically the lesson that King Bumi was trying to teach Aang got spoiled, but Aang was basically like, Uno reverse, and was essentially teaching King Bumi like his own lesson, and that is that you don't have to do everything on your own. You don't have to do it like the status quo way. Like, you can do things a different way. You can save the world with friends. And he's like, that's what I'm gonna do, bish. I'm gonna save the world with my friends, and that's the way it's gonna be. Overall, I don't think this episode was like fantastic. I definitely think there was a few things that were quite a bit different than the animated version, but there was a lot of things that were definitely in line with the animated version, and I love that. I definitely think there's just a lot of character development and character traits, personalities that are just lacking, that I definitely wish were a bit more fine-tuned. But, you know, we're just halfway through the season, so there's a lot of time for that kind of stuff to be improved on. But overall, I'm getting good vibes from the season, and more than anything, it's so much better than that godforsaken movie that, again, doesn't exist. But that is my recap for episode number 4. Be on the lookout for episode 5 coming ASAP.